All right. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
So mine is going to be a little more of like some experience, I guess. So I don't know about anybody else, but it was kind of daunting. Like I came from completely a different industry, and it's like, at what point can you start like selling your services, more or less, like for side projects and other things? And my experience has been like literally after Splurdy and even not even all of Nomster, you can get paid to do quite a bit. So that's kind of what this talk is going to be about. So just a precursor. I have a 5-year-old at home, so we do. We were talking about that before the chats. I had some free stock photography here down in our basement, so we're rolling with Lego tonight. So we're gonna go over. I guess first of all, my experience. I was a junior web developer, like paid as a junior web developer for about 6-7 months. I'm in between jobs at the moment because we're moving, and beyond that, I do have several years of business experience. I ran a painting business, so I'm kind of like I have a lot of experience with clients in general, and like a sales process in a service business. I mean, somebody's house is like one of the most expensive things that they own, probably the most expensive. So they're kind of touchy about it. So, going to cover, avoiding some pitfalls and a few guidelines in general. So the biggest thing up front is I did not realize in working with even, a client I'm working with now, like they literally think I'm some kind of wizard. It's unreal. Like, you think, oh, I don't know a whole lot HTML, CSS, that's pretty basic stuff. That's like you're trying to speak like you're from another planet for a lot of business people and just people in general. So some of the questions that I've been asked, even just the short time for side projects, I'm pretty like not aggressive person. We're like sitting in a bar somewhere, like talking to somebody, and they're like, "Yeah, but like, what about? Can you do search engine optimization?" And like, what like everybody says it's a big deal, and like, man, you are worrying about the last, the wrong thing here. And then you hear people, they get a lot of quoted prices for like, $7,000 for like a simple splash page for their site, because if somebody in a company like your company, you service larger clients, you're probably not going to, you have a bottom threshold that you won't go below because it's just not your target. So there's a lot of kind of piggybacking on I think John, that was one of your talks, was hustle and grind. You can do a lot of hustle and grind to get some smaller fish, I guess you would say. This is a basic process to follow. Kind of what I've been doing. It changes a little bit, but similar to what Colin mentioned as well. Sit down, gather some basic information and needs from the client. Like I started working with, I put together I guess you would call it a proposal. I still have to write up a small contract for a church. My parents' church, I met with the pastor. He had mentioned he wanted to go through some things like, okay, well, how serious are you? What do you want to actually do? Because a lot of places, small businesses, organizations are like, we know we need a website. And like, that's great. But what do you want it to do? So kind of like helping them, point them in the right direction. And then as far as, putting together some wireframes, I would highly suggest keeping a simple contract. I literally Googled contract for web design or web development, and there's one on there called Killer Contract. I can look it up and post that later. And it's like in plain English with some humor involved in it, but like sound as far as legal goes. It doesn't require, you know, you to be a lawyer in order to figure that stuff out. So then basically we talked about everything. I went back, thought about it, how long it would take, put together some basic wireframes. I'm going to send it back to them. Actually going to, let's see. Doesn't have to be anything that's like super crazy. See if I have a picture of it. If not, I can pull it up later. As far as wireframes go, yeah, I think that one's on my actual iPad. So, but I literally did the whiteboard thing, took a picture of it, and that's going to be my wireframes for it. Have some sort of a timeline involved. One of the projects I'm working on right now, I said I'm going to have a rough draft done by the 1st of June and completion by mid-June. So before that, you need to walk through, say, what you need to bring to the table is you need to, if there's a deposit, if there's copy involved, who's responsible for pictures, that type of thing. And then once it's all done or close to being done, depending upon if you're working on small commits or large pushes, go live. In my case, I'm using Heroku because it's super easy and that's what we've been trained to do. So I just had, I think it's like astropainting or herokuapp.com. Like you can look that up. It's live right now, but not anybody's going to find it unless I tell them exactly what it is. So I'm using that as my staging area. And then I purchased through Google Domains, an actual what he wanted for a custom domain name. And so then once it's ready to go, I will pay for it for the hobby version, probably for Heroku for that one site, and then switch it over to his custom domain. So that way you don't have a 10-second lag anymore. Invoicing, I've become familiar with FreshBooks from another project I was working on. It doesn't matter. You could write up something on a piece of paper. They have those tickets literally like at Office Depot or whatever, like little server pads. You could just say, you owe me this much, have some sort of receipts. You could type it up, just Google it. It's not that big of a deal. And then I think the biggest part besides getting paid is walk through, like, what did you learn? Like, what would you do differently? Were your estimates way off? Some sort of retrospective. I mean, that's a very agile process anyways, so you should probably do that. And you hope that it turns out really well. At least in my mind, that's what I was kind of going for. A couple of pieces of advice. Actually, I'm going to back up a second here. I guess overall, it's kind of a freaky feeling invoicing clients, like when you feel like you're not that confident in what you're doing anyways. I tend to underprice, like, oh, what am I really worth for hourly rate when I'm just starting out? But I mean, the truth is, most people, from if you hear they get bids for, like I said, over $5,000 for simple sites, I wouldn't feel too bad about it at all. And the other thing I try to keep in mind is, at this point in my career, does it really matter if it's perfect? Not really. So if you mess something up, bugs are normal. That's the way it goes. Even when you're super advanced and you have lots of experience, it's just part of the process. So kind of how you pitch it to the clients. Like if you're fast turnaround of fixing something, I mean, some things require a heavier staging area. It depends. But for a simple splash site, I wouldn't worry about it. You're going to muck it up, and that's fine. So the big thing in business I've learned is under promise and over deliver. Don't do the reverse. That's an awful experience. So you literally take a bunch of stuff from the client. Hopefully you got some basic needs that they wanted. you kind of like, if you're just starting off, like for me, I was like, I'm just going to group this in a week. This looks like it would take me about a week. So that was my estimate. And I put it as a number and I started multiplying a couple of things. And what I didn't do the first time around was have a fudge factor of sorts. So that guy got off pretty cheap because, well, it was one of my friends anyways. But the timeline, same thing. I would just tack on some extra time. And if things go well, you tell them 2 weeks or a month and they're okay with that. Then when you finish it and everything's cool at 2 weeks, they're going to be like, holy cow, you are way ahead of schedule. Like, I'm going to tell, all my friends about you. Or at least they'll be really excited and you won't have any issues getting paid. That's my experience with painting houses as well. So you're asking questions to the client, you can definitely set yourself up for success. In general, you can, the real conversation happens once you actually get a price anyways. So if you're comfortable talking about a price with people, it goes much easier for you. Like, maybe they won't trust you enough to flat out tell you their exact price, but like with the church, I got him to say, in talking, he's like, $1,000. It's like, okay, well, that means the custom work's probably off the table. Like, I'm not going to build a complete, Ruby on Rails app content management system for you for $1,000. Like, I'm not going to do that. But what they are using right now is actually, they are using WordPress or a version of it. It's like for WordPress for churches or something. So I'm gonna look into that in my contract, and then we're gonna go the template route. And I told them that straight up. I just said, you don't need a custom build. You don't even need this. Like, the church version that you were using was probably from 5 years ago. Now you'd better off be going mainstream, pick a theme. Like, just to be clear, I am going to use a template. I'm going to set it up for you for an initial build. I'm going to help you hook a couple things up. That's what they're getting for $750 is the price. It's going to take me a week or less to do this. And that's being generous. Like, I could probably set it up in 2 days, depending upon what else they want. So trying to like add buffer in. That's my third gig here. So another thing I keep reminding myself is I actually saw a couple posts for larger projects, like the whole agile board thing. I'm not saying use Trello for everything. I've also used like Jira before, which is like a massive system for job tickets, but just keep it simple for like organize it, break it into chunks that you can manage. Trello works really well for small projects. It doesn't matter if you have a whiteboard. Just organize it somehow and start busting things apart. Well, all I simply did was look at the components, and then I looked up Nomster and Flixter and the lessons, and like, hey, these both follow about the same kind of process. I'm going to start with the splash page, or build my pipeline first, then my splash page, my index. Then I'm going to probably have to figure out what my main model and controllers are. And I literally just followed those, and I started making tickets on Trello. Like, that seemed to work really pretty well last time, so why not stick to that? Beyond that, I've seen this in my previous job, and I worked on a couple of group projects in our meetup group that I kind of helped run for like the past 6 months. And everybody gets really excited about a project, myself included, and then all of a sudden it gets time to start working, and you're like, what about this? What about that? Where do I begin? Where do I do this? What if I screw it up? What if I pick the wrong naming? What if let's create a migration and it's not named right, or I want to change the table later? Maybe I have to have a master plan for everything. And after a while, you just like it's like looking at Facebook, and then like an hour later, you haven't done a damn thing, and, it doesn't help you. So it's like you're better off just to break it into a small chunk. And what Colin said before too with GitHub, if you mess it up, just revert back. Same thing with video games. Save often, and it does it for you. You can always just quick load back to what you did before and unmuck it up that way. So beyond that, I would say, so I guess to sum it all up, my experience has been communicate well with the client, have a lot of confidence going in, and just be honest with, open with people, and try and steer what their expectations are. And then you kind of have, until you have a process down and your own data, you might as well just add a fudge factor and just kind of roll with it. I would say I'm not going to be taking on any projects that are, I in my mind, I think are going to take me more than a couple of weeks, because if I am way off, I'm going to put myself in a small box where at least I could dig my way out of the hole in a month. So that'll be for later, I think. But yeah, if anybody have any questions about anything.
So Amanda had a question in chat. She was curious how you dealt with the payment of the domain, or not the domain, the payment of the Heroku, because it's a monthly like recurring cost. So what were your thoughts? Like, how did you deal with that?
Well, how I'm dealing with it right now is I simply said $10 a month for a year. So I just, that's the cost up front. I said, $120 for it to be on Heroku, and I think the hobby version is $7 a month. And I just made it a round number for him. I'm not going to tell him it's $7 a month. I told him I'm going to split it up. I think one guy asked me, and I was like, well, I'm not going to charge you the individual cost, because at that point I wasn't sure if I was going to use DigitalOcean or Heroku. So that's kind of how I handled that. And then at that point, either they can re-up with me, or I can easily move it over to somebody else. That's about as far as I thought about it.
I think the common rule of thumb, because I've had these questions too, is like, how do you deal with recurring payments and stuff like that? For me, with the few freelance clients that I deal with, they're all family at this point. So I can, if they don't pay me, I can go make them pay up right away. But when you're dealing with clients, actual business clients and stuff like that, is you typically want to have them pay for their hosting, their domain, any additional services that need to be handled. That way you don't have to send them invoices constantly when it's something that should just be set up for automatic payment. And if I forget to update my expiration date on my credit card and their site goes down or they lose their domain, that's on me, and that can get you in a lot of trouble. So for a lot of that stuff, from freelancers I've talked to, and the generic rule of thumb is to have your clients be paying for their hosting, and that's typically what I've done as well.
So just to add on to that, when I was doing, and I still am kind of doing a little bit of freelance work on the side, there's a lot of software out there now that's actually specific for freelancers to invoice other people. So I did a bunch of research, and one of the websites I used is waveapps.com. It's just called Wave Online. And it's pretty much entirely free to the freelancer, and you're able to, I'll paste it in the comments, waveapps.com. And it's entirely free to you, and they only charge a processing fee. So basically, you're able to generate monthly invoices, and you can send it off to your clients, and they can actually pay with credit card to you. And I think the processing fee is like 3% or 3.5%, and that's pretty reasonable. That's pretty much the standard processing fee, even if you were to set it up yourself. So I would take a look at that and see what other freelance invoicing software is now on the market. But that's definitely something to set up. And what I did was I would also just mark up my costs on top of that. If you want to get like very technical, if you're making enough money, you might just want to set up like sole proprietorship. And that way you're able to be able to track your expenses and your profits. So you're able to write off some costs. Like for instance, you could write off the Firehose Project boot camp $5,000 as
I did last year.
Yeah, you can write that off as an expense for your freelancing business because it is education for you to do freelancing, and you can write off costs for like Sublime and other kind of tools.
Yep.
Computers.
Yeah, my business bought the iPad.
Awesome, good stuff. Oh, cool.
So if people are getting their clients to set up the Heroku account in order to process their own payments for hosting, do you handhold them through the process of setting up the Heroku account and giving you administrative privileges to the account that they set up? Because if people are seeking out these services, they're probably not all that technically inclined to begin with.
From what I've used, I haven't done where they sign up for it, but I have had experience transferring one Heroku to another because we started off and like look, for a one group project, I'm just going to put it on my credit card. It's easier. Like we'll figure that out later. And so, but then we created like an entity for our meetup group. It's actually really simple. And like their dashboard's pretty easy. Like, you go in there and you click on a few things. So that would be one way I think you could do it, where the client could go set up, pay for the service, and then you build it all on your own Heroku, and then you could transfer it over to them. At least that's one thought.
The other way you could do it too is just set up like, if you're remote or if you're working with them, face to face. A lot of my interactions with my consulting clients is all pretty much remote for the most part. So if we have to set up any billing or anything like that, what I typically do is I'll just shoot them a link for like a TeamViewer session or some other remote desktop service and say, hey, let's go through this building real quick. I'll help you walk through it. I just need you to put in all your information so that next year when it rolls around, it automatically deducts off of your credit card. That way you have full control over this and we don't have to worry about it on my end. And you just kind of walk them through those steps, and it makes life really nice, really easy, and really simple.
Cool. Good stuff, guys.
So here's the simple wireframe that I did too. It's like just whiteboarded it. So I went from basic notes to I just started scribbling pretty much, and had my wife take a look at it because we used to go to this church. So she's one of the people, like actually a pretty good case study for somebody who would be using it. But I'm going to show this to the client or the pastor and then see what he thinks about it. So it doesn't have to be fancy as far as, I'll probably do another lightning talk on some different like mock-up wireframe tools, but I'm all about the whiteboard and scribbling on stuff, as you can tell.
Yeah, if you have Apple products, I was telling David this the other day. If you have Apple products, check out the beta version of Adobe XD, which is specifically designed for basically designers, web frame stuff. And you can set up wireboard or artboards where you can actually do wireframes just like this, and then you can just save it as files. I do all my stuff in Photoshop, and then you can save it as a PNG or a JPEG and email it off to the client and say, hey, this is what it's going to look like. As you scroll through it, this is what the changes are going to look like. This is what each page is going to look like. So if you want, again, if you're remote, it makes life easier. I can't send somebody a whiteboard in the mail. I don't want to. I could. I don't want to.
Good stuff. Well, cool. Well, thanks so much, Dave, for presenting. It's super appreciated. I think people have been interested in the whole freelancing thing, and there's so many different aspects of it. I feel like there's the finding the customer, the managing expectations, the building a product, all the way back down to like figuring out how it went. So thanks for giving us the rundown. And I have to say, I love the Legos. The Legos were like just an amazing touch on the presentation. And I'm going to be honest, I'm thinking about what are situations where I can steal that idea and use it in my life to look creative. So thank you for that too.
If anybody else is interested in more of the freelance side of stuff, I've been listening to the Freelancer Show lately. I just got into it in the last couple of weeks. It's by the same guy who does Ruby Rogues from DevChat TV.
Oh, cool.
Super helpful, and there's tons of really good information about legal stuff, about contracts, about acquiring clients, how to find them, how to charge people. I mean, it's got so much information. It's really worth checking out. I'll shoot a link into the chat too, just as a side note.
I think you can talk to that guy too. I think he has 15 minutes. 15 minutes with Charles Max Wood, I think it is.
Yeah, you can do his office hours.
Yeah, like anybody can sign up for it, and he'll like answer any questions you got
Yeah, he's
for like
a super
15.
nice guy too. I've talked to him a little bit on Twitter. Add him on Twitter, there's a pretty good chance that he'll possibly reach out to you. I added him on Twitter, and like 2 days later, he sent me a bunch of DMs, asking me questions about his shows and like what level I'm at, what I'm interested in, and he's super approachable. So if you're looking to throw ideas off somebody, it's not a bad person to do it.